Welcome back, you lovely lot, to Calendar on Cars, and you can already tell by my relaxed demeanour, it's a Friday. I'm in the workshop, and I'm going to do your questions. I will always try and answer your questions, and a massive, massive thank you to everybody that's put one in. There's tons, probably more than I can do in one video, so I will do another one for next week. So don't worry if you have asked a question. I will try and answer them all over the course of the next few videos. But if I keep these videos to about 10 or 12 minutes, it seems to be what everybody likes. Also, a huge thank you, enormous thank you, to everybody that's been watching the channel generally, because we're going to hit, I think, this weekend, 11,000 subscribers. And that's all down to you. So thank you so much for that. If you are watching and you haven't subscribed, please, it would massively help me out. And also, if you like and leave comments and ring the little bell and all that jazz, the algorithm loves it even more. And on we go, we can do a bit more together. The channel gets bigger. I can get more opportunities to show you guys stuff, and we'll have even more fun. But a heartfelt thank you. And now, into the questions. Now, Art Car Funky asks a very good question. I do get asked this a lot, so I'm glad you've asked this. People often ask, what's your favourite car? But I'd like to flip that and ask, what's the worst car you've owned or driven? And are there any cars you dislike so much that you'd never consider owning one? It's a really good question, that. My problem is, and I get this criticism all the time on my Manor Park Classics walk-around videos, where a lot of people say, nobody can like all of the cars, because when I'm doing those videos, I'm genuinely quite positive about all cars anyway. And there aren't really many cars or any cars that I totally dislike. I can see value and virtue in almost every machine. And my problem is, as a tuner, as a modifier, if I sit in a car where something's suboptimal, less than perfect, to me, all that represents is an opportunity. A great example is when I bought my Ford Mustang, my 5-litre GT, I looked at a few cars, and I sat in the Mustang and I drove like Porsche 991, I think it was at the time, a few other things before I bought that car. And I sat in the Mustang, and to me, it was a deeply flawed car. It had huge amounts of character, wonderful engine, passable gear change, soggy suspension. But there was something about the car, it had the X factor. And all I felt when I sat in that car, right, here's the list of things that I would like to do to make this car better, which I then went on and did. So to me, any car, as long as it's interesting or quirky, there aren't really any cars that aren't. Even if it's something that some people would deride, you know, like a base model tiny hatchback. I've made a video on the Fiesta. You know I love stuff like that. Every car has potential somewhere. Some of it's a little bit deeper under the surface, but every car has the potential to be an amazing car. And if I sit in a car that I don't like the dynamics, I don't like the looks, or whatever it is, to me, that's just up to me to then make it a car that I do like. So great question. And that's basically it. I'm a bit annoying in the fact there's nothing I wouldn't own. I would own anything, but if it's something that I didn't like the look or drive of, I would change that. This is a great question. Look at this. JD Sunderland 8113 says, hello, Mr. Cowland. Just wondering how you ended up working with Drew Pritchard and who had editorial control in that time, the TV company, Drew, or yourself? Drew and I actually met. I did a show ages and ages ago called Turbo Pickers, and we were doing a photo shoot for that, which revealed this incredible picture. Can you believe that to me? It's a long time ago. I've had kids and lots of jobs since then. Time's been hard. But on that photo shoot, as well as looking magnificent and unlike myself, I met Drew. Drew was obviously doing Salvage Hunters. He was already quite a big star on the channel. I was a young strapling coming up through the ranks. And we just met in makeup, darling, as you do. And I just thought, what a cool guy. You know, we just got chatting about cars, because this is the thing about Drew. Everyone knows he's an antiques guy. And bless him, he got a lot of flack on when we did the car show, saying, oh, he's not a car guy. He is such a car guy. And particularly on air-cooled Volkswagens and Porsches, which is our very much shared love, he's quite the authority. If you want to start talking part numbers and model year changes on short wheelbase 911s, I would put him against most people in the world. He's encyclopedic. And this conversation ensued. We got chatting, thought he was a decent guy. We became really good friends. I helped him to get his race license, and we just kept in touch. And then when the opportunity to make that show, Salvage Hunters Classic Cars, came along, Drew was actually the guy that fought for my corner. The channel really didn't want me to be the second presenter. They wanted him to have it as a vehicle, if you'll pardon the pun, to further his TV career. But actually, they wanted a much more famous second celebrity. They wanted somebody much better known, somebody who had a bigger draw. And Drew actually screen tested with a lot of people that you will have heard of. And for whatever reason, it just didn't work. And then they do what's called a chemistry test, where you sit together in the car and see how you present. And of course, because we were already mates, it kind of worked.
I get the whole, you know, why these cars were streets ahead of all the British stuff at this time. I get and understand all that. But fashion fades, style remains.
Is that what your tailor tells you?
Coco Chanel said that.
Really?
Yes.
Where's that jumper from?
M&S.
And that's how the show came about. And bless Drew fought very hard to get me on that show, so love you, mate. As it came to the show, you kind of have a really nice sort of balance. So obviously the channel has an idea of what we want, because if it was down to me, I mean, you've seen the stuff I collect, I would put the most random things on TV. And the problem with that is, if the audience can't resonate with them, nobody watches the show. So stuff like Renault 5s, everybody loves them. If it's something like this, which I actually bought, the Pontiac Tosian behind me, I bought that car while we were filming the show. And we actually said, should we put it on the telly? And the channel rightly said, no one has a clue what it is. Probably nobody will watch or be interested in that episode. Where Renault 5, everybody wanted one, everybody had one, their mum had one, their gran had one, whatever it is. There's an immediate recognition. So we created a long list of cars. The channel then whittles that down to a short list of stuff that they understand has a broader audience. And you do have to have a broader audience in TV. And then interestingly, as to the jobs, we'd kind of, in the nicest possible way, in a big brother, little brother way, we'd kind of fight for it. We'd kind of say, look, I want to do this. Drew would want to do that. Occasionally, we'd do what I want to do. Occasionally, we'd do what he wanted to do. If we thought it was something different, and the great thing about working with Drew was, he had some brilliant ideas, because he is both cars and antiques and design. He does come at it from a completely different point of view. And some of his ideas, like the wicker on the Morris Minor, I did think was genius. Some of his ideas, like the thin down Europa bumper on the Type 3, again, very expensive, and you could argue didn't add anything to the car, but I really like the idea. He did come at it with some very, very good, fresh thinking, which is, you know, on a car show, you need that. If it was me, I would just have made every single car to the easiest to sell formulation. And while that's very good commercially, it doesn't make great television. You need to have ideas where you can shout at the TV and go, Drew, what are you doing? And if everything I do is completely agreeable, that's not good telly. So it was kind of a nice thing. The channel wanted something, Drew wanted something, I wanted something. And then between the three of those ideas, everybody had a little bit of what they wanted. Great question, once again. Dave Worrell, 8652, says, petrol or electric, where do you think you'll go in the future? Now, this is a really interesting question, this one, because I was at an event hosted by the HCVA, which is a wonderful body of classic car and restoration companies who were talking to the government, the DVLA, the DVSA, talking about what we can do in the future as a group of people. How do we progress this industry? What do we do to protect it? And on that panel of people were some incredibly knowledgeable alternative fuel people. And I learned an awful lot on Tuesday, some of those people have agreed very kindly to come and talk on the channel. So we are going to be talking about the future of petrol engines, how classic cars fit into that, what we can all do as enthusiasts to kind of clean up our hobby a little bit. So that's coming down the road. And I don't want people to think I don't like electric cars. I think electric cars are absolutely fantastic for a certain kind of person, for a certain kind of usage. It's just that for my life and my interest, they haven't really appealed. Nobody's really made an electric car that's made me go, wow. Just put it this way, if you and I went to a restaurant, I would probably order steak, you might want salmon. I really don't like salmon. Doesn't mean salmon's not fantastic or that you don't genuinely love it and genuinely don't think it's the most fantastic food in the world. I just don't like it, I wouldn't order it. And I feel the same way about electric cars. For me, it's the noise, the smell, the visceral interaction you get with a petrol vehicle or even a diesel vehicle. I like diesel too. That's what I like. I like that part of car ownership. I like the enjoyment, the feeling I'm connected to a machine. And I know they have their drawbacks and their inefficiencies. But electric vehicles, for all of their many, many virtues, they just haven't connected with me yet. I've driven a few, I've found them fantastic. I had an Xpeng G6 on loan for a weekend. As a way of getting from point A to point B on a map, it was faultless, absolutely faultless. It did everything beautifully. And I can totally understand for a certain kind of driver doing a certain kind of thing, probably the best way to get about. But for me, while I can afford to run petrol vehicles and while I have this wonderful opportunity to drive all this old tat, I will. If in the future that's not possible to do that, then I'll think again. But while it is, and while I can, and while I can afford to, I'm going to. What's interesting is, though, chatting to some really interesting people at this HCVA do, it really opened my mind, particularly because Moggy was there from Electric Classic Cars, who was a very nice guy, and I rate him and his engineering and his work very, very highly. And he kindly invited me out there. Now, some of the stuff he does, to many people, is considered sacrilegious. He's put electric drivetrain in a Ferrari Testarossa. He took a flat 12 out to put a drivetrain in. That was a brave thing to do. And I want to find out more about that world. I will never close off my mind to this could be an alternative or this is another way to do it. But going back to that restaurant analogy, I'll certainly try it, see if I like it, but probably the chances are I'll always revert to what I know and like best, which is petrol. But another brilliant question. You're on it today, guys. Marcus Barra says, who is your favourite drummer who is a car nut? Plus, where did your love of drums come from? I like this. It's kind of a car music question. You've got to say Fuzz, haven't you? I've been lucky enough to work with Fuzz. When I started at Manor Park Classics, Fuzz was there. He is the OG. He put Manor Park on the map. What a great guy. What a great drummer as well. And also Fuzz has drummed for some of the coolest bands. So Fuzz drums for Pop Will Eat Itself, who was super cool, the Wonder Stuff. He's also done, Bentley Rhythm Ace. He's also done a lot of his own stuff. I don't know if you know, Fuzz is a very accomplished, very talented songwriter and an utter car nut. So Fuzz, I was lucky enough to spend some time with Fuzz both at Manor Park. We then went to Malta together. Both of our families went to Malta together. He's just a really interesting guy, Fuzz. He's just, on every level, he's done some really, really cool stuff. Knows his cars, knows how to fix his cars. Great drummer and drums for some very cool people. So it would have to be Fuzz, wouldn't it, if you're talking about cars and drummers. My favourite drummer, probably, that's tricky. If we're saying not car related, although they might be car fans, Jeff Porcaro from Toto, absolute legend. Stuart Copeland from The Police, absolute legend. Actually, someone I want to try and get on the channel who's a car nut and a great drummer and absolute genius is John Thompson off of The Fast Show and other funny things. Nice. He's a great drummer. He's a car guy. He's got an old Jag, actually. Let's try and get him on the channel. And where did my love of drums come from? That was my dad. My dad was a drummer in a club band. A very good drummer, better than me. And basically the drum kit was always set up around the house. So as a kid, as you do, you get to jump on it and play. And I had a band in the 90s. Two of which, I put the links to the two guys that I was in a band with. I was in a band with 5 people, 2 of which were exceptionally talented. Not me, I hasten to add. Dan and Nick, our guitarist, lead singer, songwriter, both are still professional musicians to this day. I'll put the links up to their stuff because it's absolutely brilliant. So watch them. And I'll put the link up to one of our songs, actually. In fact, here's a little excerpt of it now for you.
I don't know why, 'cause you're playing with my mind. And my thoughts of anger are gone. And above my waistground, nothing else can go wrong. And now the sky's gone grey. And my tears start falling down. This atmosphere is lonely, so my head keeps spinning round. And now the children are no more, and the laughing silent.
That was me as a fresh-faced youth on the drums. There you go. That was my 51 son. And there's a great story to how the band got its name, which is maybe for another day as well. So that's a great question about drumming. More music questions, please. I love those. Yasmography says, I'd love to see more of these. I have some questions. We'll post them individually. Firstly, what are the key skills or knowledge that you've taken from TV work or that have translated well into your life and work outside of that field? That's a really great question. Now, we were blessed with Salvage Hunters in particular. We worked with some incredible people. One is Chris Kershaw, who's a director and producer, just next level. So he's gone on to do Wheeler Dealers, a lot of Richard Hammond shows. Chris is wonderful. And if you're watching, Chris, thank you, mate. John Widdup, again, exec producer, just one of the nicest guys I've ever met and worked with. Absolutely phenomenal. Another director, producer, James Redgate, just the most unflappable cool guy. Now, in all of those cases, I learned a lot of things. One, how to structure a shoot, how to get the best out of a day, particularly how to get the best out of a guest, the way they would interview and the interview techniques that they have taught me that I've taken an awful lot from. And just also how to structure a scene. When you're working with people of that caliber, they are kind of the top 1% of car telly people. You learn so much. So everything about production, editing, camera angles, although you'd never know from this one today. This is a shocking camera angle because they'd be looking at this in despair because we're so busy in the workshop today and I'm here on my own. And there's a dead Bentley in the corner that I cannot roll in and roll out by myself. So if I moved it to get a better shot, which would make this much nicer, this frame here, I wouldn't get it back in again at the end. So this is me just being very lazy. So if you're watching, lads, apologies for this terrible framing. And I think that's what I've learned from that. When you have a TV background and you work with those people, and at break times, I was all interested in talking to the camera guys, to Adam, to Cody, to find out what they were doing and why they were doing it, because you're working with some of the most experienced people in the world. So if you're doing a YouTube channel or if you're doing commercials like I do now or corporate films, you may as well. You're getting the best education. People go to college for many, many years to not learn as much from people less talented than those guys. So I was very lucky to be able to take an awful lot away from that program, which I now use in every single day of my video making, although you'd never know it today, would you? This is a terrible shot, but needs must, needs must. Right, you beautiful people, I think that's it for today. I'm going to squeeze it into a shorter video so you don't get too bored. Thank you so much for your questions. I have got loads left over from this one, so I will try and do those next time for you. If you haven't done so already, sorry to keep going on about it, but it does make a huge difference. Do like and subscribe, do ring that bell. And there'll be some more coming soon on Sunday, where we've got part 2 of the Bentley Clean. So please do stay tuned for that. And I'll see you very soon.